I'd like to introduce our presenters. Lisa McGuire, Associate Director of Corporate Partner Relations with the Center of Career Readiness and Life Skills. Beth Setti, Associate Director of Experimental Learning and College to Career Transitions with the Center for Career Readiness and Life Skills. Cassie Montenegro, Recruiting Coordinator for Jones Day. And Nick Wagner, Learning Environments and Technology Leader for Cigna.
Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. As Patrick said, my name is Beth, and I'm with the UConn Career Center. And we're happy to chat with you today about building those professional connections and how they may lead to some amazing, unexpected career opportunities. For the session today, we're going to do a brief PowerPoint slideshow. Truly, it's brief, and learn a little bit about each other. And then I'll be transitioning over to Lisa, who will be leading us in a good conversation about it with one another. So Patrick, to get us started, I'd like to ask that you kick off our poll. So for our audience members, we have 4 poll questions we're going to be asking you. We're going to ask them sequentially, and then after they're all asked, we will review them really quickly. And then I'll go over the agenda, etc. So if you can throw in the first poll, that would be great.
First poll is live. We'll give it a few seconds for people to answer.
I don't see it, but I'm hoping others do.
Yep. So far, we've got 5 answers in.
Super. I'd say whenever you hit the 10 mark, you can probably go to the second one. And so folks are being asked some basic questions. We'd like to know your knowledge base of certain terms, phrases, how you feel about certain words, etc. And this will inform a large portion of, I think, our Q&A or our conversation piece, just when we know a better sense of who is in the audience and what is on your mind.
Okay, it looks like we're just waiting on 3 people to respond. I'll give it 10 more seconds and we'll end the poll.
Great.
Okay. You want to share results now or wait?
No, I'd rather do all 4 together if that's okay with you.
Okay. I will launch question number 2.
So for the folks watching this later, so you know what is going on in case you don't see the poll questions in the recording. The first question was, what words come to mind when you hear the word networking? We're curious what people are thinking. We know that word can evoke a variety of emotions. The second question, when was the last time you actively or intentionally built a professional connection? So just asking people to kind of say, last week, last year, 2 days ago, 5 minutes ago, at a holiday party, however you want to answer that. Can be an event or a specific period of time. And again, Patrick, whenever you feel you have enough, we can go to the third question.
Give it just 10 more seconds. We got 6 answers in 7.
Thanks, folks, for participating in our poll. It will help us quite a bit.
Launching question number 3.
Excellent. And this question is, if applicable, share how a professional connection helped you in your career. Maybe it helped you find a new job, open a door, a promotional opportunity, a sales lead, funding, a connection for a family member to get hired for an internship. Excuse me, anything like that. How has a professional connection helped really you in your career? But if it hasn't helped you, perhaps you know of someone else in your life it has helped. Or they have helped. I don't mean to refer to people as it.
And we'll give it 10 more seconds.
Thank you.
Okay. And now for the final question.
Perfect. When is the next time you expect to have an opportunity to professionally connect with someone? You can interpret that any way you like. So while people are finishing their survey polls question, I'll just briefly mention the agenda. So I'm going to introduce just some real basic working definitions and practices, some terms that we will be talking about with one another in a little bit. So I want to give you a baseline and then give some ideas about how to unlock those opportunities, how to craft that introduction for yourself, and then we will shift to hear what one another has to say, and we will end with next steps, how you can tie it together. At the end of the panel, we'll quickly come back to the PowerPoint. So, Patrick, thank you for being our guide. Would you be able to share the results for question 1 with us?
Yes.
I think you're going to have to read them to us. Oh,
Perfect.
boy.
So again, answers we received for question 1, making connections, history and experience. Got connections, relationships and opportunities, meeting with professional connections and how they can lead to opportunities, build meaningful mutual relationships, meeting with many people to ask them for help and information.
Thank you. So it looks like a number of you defined it, which totally appropriate. And a couple of you also talked about some of that emotional element that does often come with either the idea of networking or even just hearing that word. So for most of the presentation, we are not using that word because we know it can invoke certain feelings, and really it is just talking to one another and connecting, which we'll elaborate on. Great, thank you. If you can go to question 2.
Okay. Question 2.
Almost last time, seeing how much people have been connecting. It looks like it's been some people quite recently, some people a little while ago, after an event, reaching out for support, advice, questions, following up after an interview. Excellent. Those are great answers. Thank you. How have any professionals helped you in your career? Reference, absolutely. That's such a good one. PhD research project, the promotion opportunities, new job. Okay. So a lot of linear connections, which is excellent. And our last one. And when's the next time? Okay, excellent.
That's a trick question, Beth. That should be right now.
Which somebody answered actually in there.
I
Yes.
see today. I see.
Excellent. For those of you that saw that, excellent. Thank you, Patrick, for sharing those results with us. We can go on to the next slide if you would. So for the working definitions, some aspects I just would like to briefly highlight for you are, again, we have the actual definition of networking. Probably not, I'm really going to try to not use that word so much. It's about interacting with one another. It's a conversation. Sometimes it is planned, sometimes it's not, sometimes it can feel formal. At the end of the day, it is really just talking to one another in some capacity. The second box speaks to those attributes that help you build a valued and valuable connection. And these are in alphabetical order. And even though it happens to be first, I also think it's quite important that it's first, about being authentic, sincere, genuine, etc. As many of you know, if you start putting out something in a conversation and you're just schmoozing for the sake of chit chat and not really meaning what you say, it will not be effective. So making sure you're you and really being aware of who your audience is. I cannot believe I missed that typo, so I will fix that before we send that out. That's appalling to me. That's supposed to say listen. And then the second box refers to planned happenstance, which some of you may think sounds like an oxymoron, because if it's happenstance, then it's not planned. So the idea behind this career theory, and there's a book mentioned to it by someone named John Crumboltz, is you are putting yourself in a variety of opportunities that are often planned, and yet you may not know exactly who's going to be in the room with you. You may find yourself unexpectedly in a place that you weren't intentionally going to be, and a conversation occurs or a situation occurs that then suggests follow-up is needed. And if you take advantage of that follow-up, that is planned happenstance. So the happenstance was the initial interaction. What you do with it afterwards is the plan part. A number of years ago, one of our grad students was friends with someone from another institution. They were in the same grad program. The grad student worked in my office, went to the friend's undergrad alma mater for a basketball game. And it turned out the friend had worked in the president's office and had a number of connections on campus. And next thing you know, the grad student worked in my office, walked away with a brand new full-time job at that institution. The student had to apply and go through the process and everything, but getting to know the director of a brand new center in their area of expertise was amazing and absolutely was not on the agenda to go watch a basketball game. So that's just an example of planned happenstance. So again, we'll talk about that more throughout the conversation today. Patrick, can we go to the next slide? So there are different opportunities will come along for you to develop relationships, potentially have these planned happenstance experiences. Sometimes it's just part of your daily interactions and regular events that happen at work or in your personal life. Sometimes it is going to be at an actual event, such as this today, or before the meeting, before the webinar started, Cassie and Lisa and a few others were talking about the upcoming basketball games and football bowl games and connecting and who's going. That would be an amazing event that you will potentially find some connections if you're able to go to any of those. And then, of course, online, utilizing tools like LinkedIn and other appropriate social media sites, connecting with one another in distribution groups and listservs, etc. Blogs, websites, etc. There are so many ways online that you can connect with people if you do the follow through. And keeping in mind for those people, sometimes it's people really close to us, it's family and friends, and sometimes it is extended network through work, professional associations, a friend of a friend of a friend. So it is totally appropriate to work with people you know and extend beyond as long as you're not breaking any ethical rules for doing so. And basically just really being attentive to your environment and when those opportunities arise. And lastly, the other baseline we wanted to address is just how you could introduce yourself to someone. So whether it's a professional introduction or more of a personal one, and Patrick, we can go to the next slide, would be great. In this slide, we have 3 columns, just as a reminder for you that when you are crafting that introduction, really know your audience, know your environment. If it is a professional introduction, you may have the opportunity to have all 5 checkboxes in the components column and the attributes, and there may be a chance to do more of a pitch or a promotion about yourself. If it's at a social event, maybe not. Maybe just your name and a little bit about you is enough. Either way, we want you to have some ideas in mind. So when you go into different scenarios, you are not flustered with not having anything to talk about, some small talk, knowing your audience, doing a little bit of research on them. Please don't stalk them. Don't go crazy. Don't over search them on LinkedIn and their company profile, etc. But know a little bit about them. So if it comes up naturally in conversation, you're able to then address it. And a big point is, again, watching your body language. From the previous slide, we talked about it's important to listen to one another, really engage, get to know them, show that sincere interest, and then follow up afterwards. So that's, again, just giving us a baseline to feed into our conversation. So we're now going to shift out of PowerPoint. And I would like to reintroduce my colleague, Lisa McGuire, who's going to host our panel with our guest alumni, Cassie Montenegro and Nick Wagner Sr. And at the end of this, we will just return to the PowerPoint just for a quick action steps suggestion. And Lisa and Cassie, I think your meeting is such a good example of planned happenstance, and I hope you're able to talk about that in the conversation today. So Patrick, thanks for sharing, and we can go to the panel.
Absolutely. Thanks, Beth. And as Beth mentioned, I'm Lisa McGuire, and I work in employer relations, basically at the Center for Career Readiness and Life Skills at UConn, and always available if people want to have a conversation. My journey here, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, but working here is a career pivot for me. And I started here after a long career as a lobbyist in government relations. So I've done a lot of these things. The first time I ever heard the phrase planned happenstance was when I met Beth, because none of my life, I feel like none of my life was planned. It's all happenstance. And I guess that's not actually true. But I think it boils down to making an impression and being a genuine person, an authentic person. What Beth mentioned in reference to my meeting with Cassie is Cassie reached out to UConn, which we welcome all of our alums to do anytime, and said, I want to give back, which is awesome. Huskies helping Huskies. And in the course of our conversation, I learned a little bit more about Cassie, which I'm going to ask her to talk next about. And then we were asked to do this presentation, and I said, I know the perfect alum to invite. So Cassie, can you tell us a little bit about how your life and your career so far have evolved and involved some of these connections and ways to make an impression on people and maybe even get the job you have right now?
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's been a long journey, even though I've had a brief career. I graduated in 2017, and I went to UConn stores, and my first ever interaction and thinking about a planned happenstance actually happened through UConn alumni. And that was at a networking night. I know we're not trying to say networking, but it was a networking night at
Okay.
the Alumni Center where I met Miranda Reynolds, who still works at the Alumni Center. A lot of the values that you talked about in the last slides followed up, helped really get my professional career off the ground. I was new to campus. I'm a first generation daughter of immigrants. Networking as a concept was very foreign to me. So I just kept following up with her, not in a weird or creepy way, and landed my first job at UConn Alumni. And through the years, I've shifted in higher education, educational technology, and now I somehow found myself working at a law firm. And how that happened is I got laid off, unfortunately, at the tech company that I worked for. And someone had recommended, hey, have you ever thought about recruiting law students? I work in recruiting. And I was like, no. So I went to LinkedIn, looked up all of my friends who just happen to work at law firms. And one of them was a UConn alum who I had interacted with during undergrad. And I reached out to him cold after probably 5 years now. And he was happy to talk to me, tell me a little bit about the landscape. I wanted to gather a lot of information. And then he directly connected me to someone where I work today, and helped me get my foot in the door, my name on that consideration list for the job I have. So it's a little bit of
Awesome.
my story. Yeah.
That's great, Cassie. Thanks. And that's exactly right. That's planned happenstance. That's connections. That's making an impression. Nick, I know you make an impression. I remember the first time I met you. I guess that was 3 jobs ago. Maybe you can share sort of your journey and how you have made connections and capitalized on those. And in this case, I don't mean it capitalization in a bad way. Use it to your advantage.
Yeah, and thank you, Lisa and Beth, for having me. Happy to give back. I always enjoy doing these types of events, whether it be for UConn alumni or others. So I think when I think of, and I know we don't want to use the N word, right? The networking word, but when we talk about the networking, the idea of it, a lot of people are afraid of it, right? And they don't want to actually be a part of it, and because they're worried that they might make a mistake, or it's going to be hard, or they don't want to do the small talk. There's a million reasons why people don't want to be involved in networking. And what I always tell people, and you kind of said it before, is it's really just about being yourself, right? You don't have to. Being fake is actually the opposite of what you want to do, right? You want to be yourself, and you want to be genuine with people. So when I think of networking, not only has it helped me at work immensely, right? Where I work every day in human resources. It helps me outside of work. So I think there's ways that you can use it both internally and externally from your role, whether you're using it to find your next job internally or to get some work done within your job, or if you do need to find your next opportunity, using your network to find that next opportunity in another company. So yeah, I know we're going to dive into more questions, but it's been something that I've always really enjoyed doing, and happy to be a part of the conversation today.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So when you say enjoy doing, and I know Beth considers herself an introvert, not to put you on the spot, Beth. I don't know, Nick, do you consider yourself an introvert? I consider myself an extrovert, and every single test has identified me as that. Where do you fall on that scale?
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm an extrovert, and so I think for a lot of people, there's a common misconception you have to be an extrovert to be good at networking. I actually disagree with that. So it might take a little bit more. It might take a little bit more for people that are introverts to get out there and do it. But I think anyone can actually be good at networking, because again, it's not about being an introvert or an extrovert. It's just about connecting with people. And so for me, it comes very easily because I actually get energy off of connecting with people. Like, one of the hardest things about COVID was I didn't get to see people in person anymore. That was actually a really challenging thing for myself as an extrovert. But you learn to adapt, and you learn to network over video and over the phone and in different ways, and through social media. So there's so many different ways to do it. It doesn't have to be in person only. You can absolutely do it virtually. But I think the one thing I always tell people is whether you need a job or not, you should always be networking, always, because you never know what's going to come of it. And you don't just network to find a job. You network for a lot of reasons. I've made great connections and great friendships with people that I've met networking that have nothing to do with my job at all, but it helped me provide other opportunities in other areas of my life that I want to be involved with. So it's just one of those things. I know it can be really overwhelming for people, but I think once you start realizing that it's just about being you, it makes it a lot easier for people.
That's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. It just makes you a more interesting person, right? And the more people you meet from different backgrounds, just the more you're just a richer person in so many different ways. I was watching a Kennedy special, and Rose Kennedy had said, our family sat down every night and talked current events because it made the children more interesting people in general. And meeting different people from different backgrounds just gives you that richness, whether you're going to use it to find a job in the future or not, right? So Cassie, you said when you lost your job, you reached out to people and got ideas and met with them. I did the same thing. I lost my job. I was laid off. And I went back and just touched base with people I hadn't talked to, in some cases, years, right? Life happens. Maybe you start a family. That's what had happened with me. And you get tied up with your own life, and you reach back out. And you just touch base with them. You don't ask them for a job necessarily. You're just genuine. You just connect. And then, through the course of the conversation, maybe it'll come up that you're looking for a job, and maybe they have some ideas for you. But it's all about that genuineness, right? And listening and learning, catching up. Cassie, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on those people you reached out to. You said, that some were alums, that then you use LinkedIn to follow up with that, but maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's interesting when you're saying, hey, it's been a long time, right? So a lot of networking, in my case too, we think about recency. Lisa and I connected, recently, and she's like, oh, hey, there's going to be this panel coming up. But for me, I think I try to really hold true to my values and authenticity. I like to think I give off some sort of like warm kind of energy, inviting. And that's what people remember and think of you as, right? So when you're thinking about reaching back out, or maybe even like a cold outreach, you want to think about what your profile kind of looks like on LinkedIn, maybe your social media footprint. And then obviously, if you knew the person in person or from an event or something, just think about, hey, I was at this networking event, there's an open bar perhaps, and just make sure you're presenting yourself in a certain way. These are things I think about when making and remaking some of these connections. So just trying to have your brand and personality and authentic self at the table, but thinking about, like we were saying, hey, Google is here. People will find you. Will find everything about you, honestly, if you don't lock it down. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about when we think about making those connections, reconnecting, putting your best kind of like face forward. And I know in the last couple of slides, we talked about that initial introduction. So whether it's your first introduction or a reintroduction, I know I personally need some reminders and memory joggers, especially if it's been a few years. I had reached out to my someone that I'd known in undergrad on LinkedIn. I said, "Hey, it's me, Cassie. It's been a few years. I remember we used to hang out at the Alumni Center a lot. I've been, I saw that you're a lawyer now, and I'm really interested in hearing about your experience. I'm thinking about pivoting into the world of law. Can we catch up soon?" Something as simple as that really helped, and then obviously got his eyes on it. But also just, stay positive. Some people won't respond. I've gotten ghosted a lot, and that happens. It's not on you. So it's just my 2 cents.
Exactly. That's great. And you're authentic you, and it doesn't have to be a networking event. It doesn't have to be an event at all. For those who aren't comfortable and say, to your point, Nick, I hate going to those things. I hate small talk. I hate this. I hate that. It can be one-on-one, and people love to talk about themselves, right? So if you reach out to someone via LinkedIn, for example, and ask them, can you give me 10 minutes of your time to talk about where you work and what you do? Generally, they'll be willing to do it, right? You're not asking them for a job. You're just learning, right? Just consider every interaction that you have an opportunity to become richer and fuller and gain more information about something you didn't know before you started the conversation. That's it. What am I missing here as I guess you're the resident introvert, right?
So yes, so I introvert, ambivert, right? If I'm going into a work-related situation like this and I have something to talk about, namely my job or something else, I am very comfortable chit-chatting. As soon as I go into a situation where I don't have that baseline, forget it, I withdraw. I am not good at the small talk chit-chat. So having those tips in line, I think I talk about this with students that I teach in a transition class from senior year to after college. Whenever people find out at work at UConn, of course, they always ask either about the jungle, if they're a certain generation, or about how the basketball team is doing. So I better know who a top player is on both the men's and women's teams. I need to be at least somewhat attuned to this world because I know that's the connection. So preparing ahead of time helps me feel more comfortable as an introvert. And then Nick was talking about charging your battery. I charge up, maybe I do some solo stuff first to kind of rev up, go in, and then I'm not going to plan another big social event after a large interaction event. I'm going to go somewhere to recharge and recalibrate. The next part is making sure there's follow-up. So sending a thank you note, sending a quick email, connecting on LinkedIn, whatever it is, I think is pretty key. And then my last thing I wanted to mention is I've been involved through work and personal whatnot on different committees and organizations and associations. And I've let me know lots of career staff across the country. And sometimes we have national conferences. And so I've reached out to colleagues at other schools that I've met and said, would you like to co-present on something? And so it's a great way to connect in a more that introverted way that I'm more comfortable with, and yet still putting myself out there as just more in a public way.
Yeah. And Beth, you have a lot of other interests, right? You interact with people around the cat. You volunteer for a cat shelter, etc. And those are connections you're making every day. Everyone you're talking to, doesn't matter what they do in life, you're making these connections and you're making an impression on them. right? So that if they happen to run into someone or an opportunity, they may think of you because they know you as a person, they know you as an authentic you and sort of your skills, etc. So a lot of these interactions are one-on-one. They're not necessarily large group events that are specifically centered around networking. The other thing is your day-to-day. I know one of the slides mentioned day-to-day is important. Internally, right, Nick, when you get a message from someone internally that you maybe don't work with every day, and they ask you for something, just any kind of random question, I'm very sure that you go out of your way to give them a thorough, response that is your genuine self. You've made an impression, right? And it's you're banking something right there, and you're making this impression so that in the future when their name pops up, oh wait, I've had an interaction with them, right? So that too is making connections and networking, right? What other things? And
Yeah,
I want to
I think that's
remind,
actually,
I
I
just
think
want to
that's probably
remind people
under,
to throw things in the chat. Sorry, Nick. I just asked you a question
no,
that I
that's
interrupted.
probably under appreciated, I think, for many. But a lot of people, when they think of networking, they think of what you said, like a networking event you go to and you meet a bunch of people you don't know. Networking within the company you work at is actually is probably the most frequent time you'll actually network. So, so you mentioned, maybe you don't know someone, and then someone asks you, some questions, you help someone. I mean, every single interaction is honestly a chance to network, and it's kind of two things. There's the you work with someone, you network that way just by running into them or having a meeting with them, and then there's a planned one-on-one, like Beth had mentioned, where you can set up time to network someone and really kind of dive deep with someone individually. But at most companies, you don't get work done by some hierarchy where it says, well, this person's the boss and they're going to tell you what to do and you're going to tell that person what to do. Most of the time it's by who you know, right? And being able to have that internal network and being known as a connector, those people are usually very very influential. And even in the HR space, a lot of people might not know, but there are organizational network analysis that HR teams do within companies to find out who are those people, those connectors and those networkers that make those connections across the company. So it is something that I think internally at your place of business is really, really important. And I think most people probably know who that person is that they can go to and say, hey, if I need to know how to do this or need to know this person, can you help me? And everyone knows who to go to. And then that person then makes that connection. So yeah, that internal networking really makes you a more effective employee, in my opinion.
Cassie, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm nodding along because I agree. Yeah, so in my previous roles and my current role, there's also been opportunities to join different affinity groups or employee resource groups. Those are great daily, monthly, however often, opportunities to connect with people internally. And then I also was I love watching Survivor, and I've made a great connection at work here with someone who also is a Survivor fan. And she really helps me understand the inner workings of what it's like to be a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. And that connection has been really great when it comes for me to learn and understand how to talk to the law students and schools. And then my other piece about internal networking, that kind of sprung a light bulb for me was thinking about your work product. Like Nick was saying, obviously it's not one person who gives all the orders or anything like that. We are coming into a very collaborative kind of work space, and it's been getting better, I think, with technology and understanding intergenerational relationships. But just having really good work product and having it in front of certain eyes or teammates could also, just thinking about brand and connection, and being a resource versus a roadblock and having to redo another project for someone because it wasn't a certain way, is a good way to connect and network too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point on employee resource groups, and you could create a survivor committee, right? or a club, right? And the larger organizations all have those opportunities, large and mid-size, I would say, where you're just like your social life and your private life, like the cat rescue that Beth works on, you can have that in your workplace as well. And the ERGs in particular, join them, right? Because you have something in common. They're always centered around something that you have in common, whether you're a supporter of something or you're a member of an affinity group, whatever the ERG is centered around. But you're also all different departments, you're all different levels, etc. So those are networking, right? But you have something in common. So you're starting comfortable with one thread that goes throughout. The other opportunity you have at that point is to find a mentor, right? Or a sponsor. And it doesn't have to be a formal mentor program or sponsor program, right? You hit it off with someone who has maybe a little bit more experience than you do, or has done something that you, or is in a position that you aspire to. You don't have to ask them formally, will you be my mentor, right? It's just you develop this relationship that's organic and they become, in essence, your mentor or your sponsor. Has anybody had that experience here? Because I know I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I can share that in my last job. We didn't put a label on it, but
Okay.
it's still happening.
Yeah.
A mentor. She is the head of DEI at my previous company, and I remember when I got laid off, or I was considering making a job switch, or just wanted to get to know someone in her network. She had connected me to a few people, but the connection came because we had a Survivor Slack channel. It always goes back to Survivor, and a fantasy team. So even in the smallest things, like if you have a fantasy football team, you never know, you could be playing against someone's friend that works at a company eventually that you can try to get that relationship with. But yeah, she's been a great mentor, and just really helped me with kind of foreseeing what I want in a career, what I want in a job, and then has also connected me with some really phenomenal people.
Absolutely. Anybody else have a?
Yeah, I think on that topic, Lisa, the topic of mentors and sponsors, I think just the thing to note on that is that the unique difference between a mentor and a sponsor, where and what you will get out of each of those relationships, right? And I always encourage everyone to have a mentor. I have multiple mentors. I honestly think it's one of the best things you can do, both personally and professionally for you. And to your point, many of those mentors you find through networking. So yeah, I mean, we could just list, for hours, all the benefits of networking. I think for many though, I think people understand there are benefits of it. I think for most, it's really, I think the fear of actually having to do it. And so I think what Beth said earlier was really, like I said, such an important thing to note, that networking doesn't have to be an event. It can be one-on-one. And if you are someone who is more of an introvert, then doing one-on-one networking can be a lot more, I think, feasible for you, and probably a lot less anxiety provoking doing something like that, rather than going in a room of 40 people that you don't know, right? Which in some people's eyes would just be really terrifying. So it's all about, what works best for you. There's no right or wrong answer to it. It's just what do you feel comfortable with? And just know that, you always want to just continue to do it, because you never know what might come out of it.
That's exactly right. And to your point, mentorships are often organic, right? They're happenstance, right, Beth? That word again.
Absolutely, one of my favorites. In graduate school, I studied lots of career theories, and this is the one that resonates the most to me. partially because there are so many phrases from decades ago that mean the same thing. When a door closes, a window opens, or when opportunity knocks, answer. Like all these pearls of wisdom that someone then put together and put a formal theory on it and said, okay, here you go. At the end of the day, right, it's a little bit of just common sense and being ready to take advantage of opportunities. And Nick, you spoke to this, realizing that almost anything we do might become an opportunity to build a connection, etc. And before social media became what it was, because that's how long I've been doing career coaching, I would talk to students a lot about look for those career opportunities in everything. And as social media built up a little bit, it's be aware of what's happening in your environment, because it can also go, the other way, which is a whole different webinar, right, Patrick? But really looking for those career opportunities. As Lisa said, I volunteer at a cat shelter, and when someone identifies that they attend UConn or are an alum of UConn, depending on how the conversation's going and the vibe, I may disclose that I work here. I don't always. Sometimes I've had to decline people from adopting, and therefore I'd rather they don't know that I am part of this, if we work at the same place, for example. But in general, it has been wonderful that I've been able to say, oh, I work in the Career Center, and they talk about what they studied, and it gives us a baseline. And on occasion, I have worked with a student who then has followed up and said, can I meet with you for career coaching? Boom. So, yes, there's a little bit of it's not a mentor-mentee, right? And it is work related. However, it's connections. And that individual might not have come through the door at the Career Center if we hadn't had that conversation off-site. Or I've been at social events and I've met parents, and they're very happy to learn that I work at the Career Center, because they'll talk about whatever year their student is, and I'll hand them a business card and say, feel free to pass it along whenever they're ready. They can reach out. Some do, some don't. I will say one time, the only time that I've had my outreach, networking, connection thing kind of foible was I was out to dinner with adult children of a couple that my husband and I know. And the daughter is CEO of a business in the state. And I got very excited. So I was like, oh, recruiting at UConn, that would be great. And basically, after they kind of introduced what their company does over the dinner table, when I did a follow-up, the person said, I'm on vacation the next 2 weeks. I don't want to talk about work. And I was like, dang, right? Because I always want to talk about work. So some of that is just being really attentive to body language and cues. And after like a month passed, I did reach out over LinkedIn and said, can we connect? Right. So I waited a little bit of time. So again, read the room. Mentoring and sponsoring, definitely different, as Nick said. And if you can find someone who will be your advocate, your sponsor, be your voice at their table to help you move up over whatever it may be, that's phenomenal.
I think that's one other thing that I just want to highlight on what you just spoke to is, I often do a lot of work with people that are, maybe looking for another job or just got impacted by a layoff and need a job. I always tell individuals, like, you need to network months or years before you need a job. You can't start networking the day you find out you've lost your employment. I think that is not the time to start, right? And I know a lot of people, when I tell them that, like, hey, you want to be doing this ahead of when you need a job, like that's the most efficient way to do it, and the least pressure to do it, right? Because if you just start networking when you lose your job, the chances of you networking with someone and needing to ask them for a job just went up exponentially, right? But if you build those relationships ahead of time when you don't need a job and you're honestly being genuine, that you just want to get to know them and learn what they do, you have a much better chance of the networking being successful. So it's just something I always try to tell people, you need to always be networking, because you never know when you might want to find a new job or need a new job, and you don't want to start the day that happens. I cannot stress that enough for people.
Absolutely, Nick. That's totally on the mark. And again, it makes you a more interesting person, right? Because you've learned something about somebody's passion and about somebody else's role in their company and their industry, et cetera. And Beth, it's also the reverse of what you were saying. Well, first of all, it's also sales, right? So you were basically selling what you do at UConn with some of those parents of students. So it's a great sales opportunity, networking. We haven't even mentioned, we've focused on our own careers and career advancement, but it's also a great sales tool, right? When you're networking, whether you're in, same industry or selling a product they're interested in today or in the future. So I think effective salespeople know this. It's intuitive to successful salespeople, but also the reverse, Beth. When you're talking with someone from UConn and in your work environment, and you find out that you have cat rescue in common, right? So maybe somebody's a big, a cat person. I'm a dog person. It's really hard for me to even get these words out. But anyway, there's another connection that down the road, you never know, right? So maybe today you don't interact with them on a work level, but you've connected with somebody at UConn, at your workplace, who's a cat lover. And down the road, all of a sudden a career opportunity comes up and you've made that connection through cats versus through your professional life. So networking is not a bad word, and it's something we all need to embrace and enjoy. And that's the key. It's really hard to say, I enjoy networking for a lot of people, but you can enjoy it and it can be enriching. So if each of you had one thing to recommend to people around that connections, relationships world, what would it be?
Sure, I'll kick off. And there is more to me than just cats. I know Lisa's focused on that. As
Sorry.
people know, I'm not the crazy cat lady, though I have convinced people here to adopt from the shelter I work with, we'll say. I would say join committees and go to events outside of your workspace. So I've been at UConn for over 20 years, and I've been able to know a lot of people. And again, even as an introvert, my preferred is come into my office, sit and do my work, do whatever my work is, and leave. And so I do make myself go to educational and social events, be seen, say hello to the right people, or join a committee that's beyond my department because I get to know other people at the university, which then leads to stronger relationships. It helps me do my job because now I have cultivated relationships outside of my department, and it makes coming to work, I like coming to work, so I don't want to say more enjoyable. It elevates the experience. So I'd say expand your opportunities that you can make for yourself.
So Sandy wants to know what cat shelter you volunteer for, Beth.
It is called Connecticut Cat Connection. So it's by the airport and Bradley Airport, and anyone can reach out to me separately. I'll be happy to chat with you. And thank you, Lisa. Yes, I do love to read and I like musical theater. So thank you. I am very nerdy, right? And very introverted, as you can see. But yeah, I am more than a crazy cat lady. So I'll bump it over to Nick is unmuted. So Nick, I'll bump it to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of tips I could give, but I think using LinkedIn is probably one of the things I would really stress with people. It's my favorite social media platform, and it really does provide you. It gives you a platform and a network, and people are expecting you to network. So it makes it very easy for people. I think it takes a lot of the pressure out of it, and it's just a great way to learn about what other people do, learn about other companies, learn about other industries, and especially if you're like about to graduate from college or a new grad, it's a great place to start to help you with your career. So I would say I tell everyone they should be on LinkedIn and they should be active on there because it really is going to help you professionally when it comes to your career.
Cassie.
These are great themes. I think for me, it's two-prong. One is kind of just getting to know yourself and your brand is really important to be able to talk to someone else and convince them, hey, this could be a great connection. For example, I go by Cassie. My mom gave me the name Cassandra, but I just know I go by Cassie, and that's okay. And that's professional. It's who I am. And then the other one is just understanding that, especially for new grads or people who are graduating soon or in transitions, like community takes building. Like it's not going to come to you necessarily. And I think we've been talking about a lot of those themes today. So just talking about where Beth and her community of cats and theater and reading, um, and my community of Survivor, you really have to seek out these connections and be really intentional about who you're kind of bringing in and cultivating, and also just having that critical like lens and analysis of like, okay, maybe this person isn't selling me or telling me the right things, and having other people in your network to connect to. So be yourself and building and creating your own community.
Absolutely. That's great. Great advice by everybody. I love that people said join things, be connected. The only thing I would caution, because this has happened to me before, you might be passionate about cats, but don't so read somebody's body language, right? Don't go no overkill on cats. So I'm going to get off the cat subject so that I don't that I practice what I preach. But no, my point being, just be curious every day. Be curious with people. Small talk is not a bad thing. Starting a meeting, there's nothing wrong with starting any kind of meeting. If you don't know somebody, learning one little factoid about them by asking them about it. It just makes you a better person, more interesting. You're more genuine, you're more authentic, and people will remember you. To Cassie's point right at the beginning, you come off as warm, and people remember, the experience of meeting you versus what you do versus your title. So, I think we have one more slide on takeaways, and I'm not sure we have anything more to add, given that we're getting close to the end of time. Is there anything I haven't included, or questions from the audience?
I haven't seen any new questions, so feel free to, folks want to throw them in before you leave us today. By all means, the very first follow-up we recommend is visiting your LinkedIn page, as Nick was mentioning earlier. When I work with students, I do tell them as they start to do their outreach efforts and connections, make sure it's employer ready. So you want to make sure it is truly ready to be visible in public. So over the past few years, our department has worked quite closely with Patrick and the team over at Foundation. So there's a number of webinars that I've referenced in here. I know Patrick mentioned at the very beginning there are close to hundreds, right? Definitely dozens of webinars, but probably over 100. And that's the link at the very bottom. But I do encourage you to watch the Elevate Developing Your Online Professional Profile, because it's got excellent tips, if I do say so myself, on both passive and active ways to connect and present your message and reach out to people. Keep working on that introduction, whether it's professional or just talking to people in general. Again, it doesn't always have to be work related. We want you to feel comfortable when you're put in an environment to introduce yourself and have something interesting to speak about, and recognizing that there's many different times when that might happen. Try to push yourself out of your comfort zone, one task for each situation. So if I'm going to a large room with 25 people I don't know, and that is, again, not my preferred way, what's my task that I'm going to do? I'm not going to just stay by the food area and the drink area because that gives me something to do with my hands and my mouth. I'm actually going to try to immerse myself into a conversation with people, for example. Reaching out to people that you haven't connected with recently is always helpful. Lisa did that, Cassie did that, I did that when I've gone through some job fluctuations, or again, reaching out to collaborate on something. I do recommend, if possible, stay in touch with people 3 or 4 times a year. 2 are kind of built in: the holiday season, whatever holidays you celebrate or they celebrate, and also a birthday. So you have 2 easy ways, and then reaching out to connect. Wanted to give you an update, check in on how you're doing. It doesn't always have to be an ask. It's more, how's it going? And as I mentioned at the beginning, there's so many excellent videos. If you have some time around the holidays, some downtime, or whenever it works for you, follow up. And Patrick, thank you for allowing Lisa, myself, and our panelists to be part of Elevate each year. We definitely appreciate it.
And I'm going to throw in one more reason to reach out to folks. just pick somebody today, right, this afternoon, to randomly reach out to that maybe you haven't touched base with. So my thought today that I reached out to someone I know who works in an insurance company, right, in health insurance company, to say, hey, how are you doing? You know, health insurance companies are in the news right now, and I'm thinking about you. That's it. They may not even respond. Who cares, right? It's just, I mean it. I hope they're doing okay, and it shows a little compassion, but it's genuine as well. So that's your assignment today, this afternoon. Think of somebody who maybe hasn't heard from you in a while, that you're just giving a word of support. I'm thinking about you, and people always appreciate that.
They do. And Nick, that's to me is sort of your MO, right? Like that's your mode. You reach out to people so often, I think, just checking in to see how others are doing.
Yeah, no, people do appreciate that. And, you know, I think the other thing that I'll do sometimes is even tell people like, hey, you don't have to reply. Just wanted to say hi and see how things are going. And that then sometimes takes the pressure off them to actually have to reply back with an answer like immediately or even at all. So yeah, this was a great suggestions. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. So thank you, Lisa and Beth and Patrick and Sarah.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Cassie.
Thank you all again for your time and expertise today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Be sure to check out uconalumni.com/events for future UConn alumni happenings that are going to be in your area. In the meantime, again, thank you everyone for your participation, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Go Huskies.
Go Huskies.